All right, let me see, make sure everything's good because they YouTube be real fickle here lately. All right, so yeah, it looks like we good. Welcome to. Oh, I almost did an intro for ILP. My B. Thanks for coming to the Addict Show. Well, the Addict Spotlight, technically. Today we're going to be talking about Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And, really about, the adventure into this game because, for my knowledge, I think BG's the only person that has a beta. But how far would you say you're into it, BG?
I think my file says I'm about like 35%. I feel like, and it's crazy because I feel like I'm in the deep with it. Like I'm deep down the rabbit hole. Like I've explored a lot of the map. I feel, but I'm very like meticulous because it's so dense that I'm not moving on to another area until I find everything in the area that I'm at, and I know there's nothing else I can access with the abilities I have. So once I realize, okay, I got to unlock something else, that's when I move on. And then as soon as I get that ability, I go back like throughout the whole map that I have
Oh,
to
so
see
pretty
what I
much
can
you're
access
playing it
now.
like you would play
I'm playing it like
a Metrovania.
OCD Metroidvania style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things that we'll definitely what I really want to get into, we'll definitely come back to that. Is let's first go into like the exact difference between this and the Blind Forest. Did you both of you play Blind Forest?
Yes.
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 And what was the drastic improvements and something that caught you off guard from the first one to the sequel? So we'll definitely start off with is it inspired? Like, oh, Lucas,
Insipid.
Lucas,
Insipid
it's
Ghost. Yeah.
Lucas. We'll call you Lucas. So
That's cool,
let's
man.
go. What was the big difference in the games compared to you and something that caught you off guard?
Truth be told, very little caught me off guard. In fact, in looking back at my time with Blind Forest into Will of the Wisps, I felt like it was a lot more of the same, but refined and cleaned up in terms of like abilities and platforming. Blind Forest had a lot of difficulty spikes for me that caught me off guard and would stump me for a long time. I think that Will of the Wisps had very similar. Uh, Portions, but it ramped up a little bit easier. So in fact, very little caught me off guard, Addict. It was more that I felt like this was more Ori. It was better Ori. It was more balanced Ori. And apart from the technical glitches, it was a far better game than Blind Forest.
Yeah, and we'll definitely because I do want to bring up a statement I hear from a lot of people. It's not necessarily an Ori, but BG, I know you're playing this on hard, so I know you're having a different experience than me and Lucas did.
That makes
So
you crazy, BG. You are crazy. Let me tell you that right now. You are crazy, sir.
because there's certain parts in this I couldn't even imagine on hard, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why exactly why I'm being so meticulous. Because I know, when you play that way, it's a lot more rewarding and it makes the rest of the game easier. Like, I mean, some of the trials, like the combat trials, oh yeah, they get crazy. But I've unlocked a lot of the energy cells, a lot of the life cells for where I'm at, pretty much like all of them. And it's not so bad right now where I'm at. I say it's manageable, and I'm using the right shards, and I'm not like concentrating on buying a lot of shards. I'm being very strategic in which ones I buy, and I'm upgrading those. So that makes the game like I have the shard where you take less damage. I have that at like maxed out. Well, I don't know if it's maxed out, but I take 30% less damage. So, you know,
all right,
it's
so
it's it's manageable.
one of the biggest things that clearly has been changed, I think is the most noticeable to me, was the combat. Now, in the original one, you just had like this little ball that followed you around. You can either shoot projectiles or charge it up to shoot one giant like shockwave. Do you guys think that was the way to go? Or do you think this new system that they've made in Will of the Wisps is real redefined? You could tell they put a lot of thought process into it.
Um, yeah, so as far as the combat, yeah, they put a lot more thought into the combat and a lot more depth into it. That and the platforming. There's just I just keep running into things as far as the platforming, that they put you in situations where you have to combine everything. You may have to, double jump and then dash to a platform and then grapple something. So then you have to do other things combined with that, especially when it comes to the pinwheels that have the wheels that have like thorns on them, and you have to like use your momentum to like throw Ori from the spinning object. So it's a lot of like crazy stuff going on with that, and
That
and the
that
and the
was
weapons. Yeah.
that was one of the first platforming things too. Is when those wheels are going, you'd have to like latch onto it and let go at the right time to get enough momentum to throw you to the next one.
Yeah, and also there was the I don't know, it was in the burrows where you had to drop into the portals kind of, and you had to drop into the portal at the right momentum because it shoots you out of the other portal. But if you don't have enough momentum going in, it's not going to shoot you out properly. And depending at the angle you go in, if you come out the other side not at the right angle, you're gonna hit a thorn. So like stuff like that, I'm like, yo, this they put a lot of like thought into this level design.
So
I would agree with BG on that one. They put a lot of thought into the the combination of combat and traversal, and a lot of the abilities that he has in this game feel to me to be well more thought out, planned ahead, and for every one of those extremely challenging platforming appearances, there are some fairly simple solutions that once it clicks with you, once you speak the game's language, it goes a lot faster. And a lot of the boss fights, they couple those things together. They combine the platforming and the combat, and you using abilities that might be used typically for platforming. They put it into a combat role, or vice versa. And so I think that's the biggest thing that's most noticeable about these abilities, is that they do a really good job at letting them help you explore the world. But for many things in the basic parts of the game, you can you can explore it in multiple ways. You don't need one particular ability to get to certain places, but boss fights do require you to have certain things.
yeah, we'll definitely get to the boss fights here. You know, that's definitely one of the topics. I'm a huge boss person. I'm sure BG can relate. But one of the things I want to really, really bring up is the story. Now, we can't really go into a whole lot because BG really ain't done much in the game. But what I really want to bring up is because I know all of us have done this, and it was one of the nitpicks that I had for the game is really how much they didn't really try to act like Ori didn't go through Blind Forest. Did you notice that? Like, they were trying to act like Ori never done anything like this. When the game started, you didn't even have double jump. And obviously they're doing that to be more open to people who have never played the first one so they can play the second one without any kind of hiccups. But I did feel it was a little disappointing. It's like, you know, they clearly have characters from the first one, but they don't really interact with Ori like he's done anything like this in the past, if that makes sense to you guys.
Um, yeah, only thing I
Because
can
when
say
the
on that,
spirits talked to him, they didn't even mention that either.
yeah, the only thing I did notice since they took away his abilities is they seem to have given it back to him a lot faster. Like you ran into them at a faster rate than you did in the blind forest, and I guess that was their way for making up for the fact that yeah, you lose all your abilities.
I would agree with BG on that. I felt like I got him back real fast, and that rewarded the removal of it, at least early on. And the only thing I can think of for the reasons they might have done that was to help with pacing early on, so that you didn't run your way through elements that they wanted to show you early. That's the only thought process I can have that seems to make sense
I
there.
get that, but at the same time, I felt like they could have done that better. Like, you know, they could have had something at the beginning, or some kind of, you know, one of those, you know, emotional cutscenes explain, like, because you went from the end of the first one, like pretty much having everything. You know, you could triple jump, you had the bash ability. So like to go from that to the beginning of the first one where you're walking really slow, like they could have one of those moments where he lost his abilities or something. Because I felt like that was a hiccup in the story. Like it felt like it's its own story that has nothing to do with the previous one. Like if it wasn't for having characters from the first one in the second one, I would think it's like a sequel or a prequel or a completely different story in general. Like it, or he could have been a different character. Like because
I see what you're saying, but it did not affect me in that way. I had that thought, and then I quickly dismissed it because of how quickly I got the other stuff. But I do understand where you're coming from there.
Yeah. So one thing that I noticed a lot, because I know that you had a bet going, BG, with the Metacritic score and stuff, but you know we don't really go into huge of that. But I saw a lot of reviews bring up, you know, there's a saying that people love saying, it's more Gears, it's more Ori, it's more Halo. Do you think that this is more Ori, or do you think this is Ori more redefined? Because I don't really necessarily believe in that. I feel like it could be more Halo, it could be more Gears, it could be more Ori, as long as the product we get in the next alignment of the franchise improves on the previous ones. If that makes sense to you guys, do you think this is drastically different than the first one, and doesn't necessarily deserve that? Oh, it's just more Ori. Because I did read a couple reviews and they did say that it just feels like more Ori.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, it's more Ori, but it's drastically, and that's like really what sequels. I feel like sequels are supposed to be.
I
Maybe by the third game, you should make a drastic improvement, but the second one, it should just continue with the other one, what the first one did in a drastic way. So I think they did the right thing here. You know, it shouldn't be like some huge overhaul. You know, like I said, third one in the series, I could understand that point, but not the second one.
Yeah, and I think these days people are so sick and tired of sequels that they're willing to say that way ahead advance when they really shouldn't. Because when you play Ori in the Blind Forest, they wanted you to focus on platforming. I think we could all agree on that. That was the center of the game, platforming. And when they went into this one, they're like, look, we got the platforming down. Let's escalate that. Let's make that better. But this one, we're not going to focus so much on platform because we know how the platforming is supposed to function in this game. Let's focus on the combat. And, you know, I really felt like, because they broke down the abilities to where, you know, you have the Y, the X. It kind of like gave me a Salt and Sanctuary vibe, if that makes sense. And, you know, the gameplay kind of did. But when it comes to the bosses, because I feel like there wasn't a lot. Now, I don't know this, Lucas. I never came across them again. Remember the wolf at the beginning that you swiped with the fire?
I think so. Honestly, I've put 25 hours in. If it was early on
Well, it
and
was
it
the
didn't show
very
up
first time
again.
you came across a boss. You had the torch that was on fire that you had to hit the
Oh,
wolf.
yes, yes,
Did
yes.
we
Yeah, I
ever
didn't.
fight that thing again?
I don't believe so. No, I don't believe I saw that a second time.
Because
No.
it made it seem like that was the last boss. Like, you know how they come at the beginning and you escape and then you end up fighting them later on in the game. I was
Mhm.
like, maybe it's a hidden boss somewhere in the game, but I never came across it again. Did you, BG?
Not so far where I'm at. Um, and that boss, that I guess if you call that a boss, I was like, oh, I didn't like the way it was, but and granted,
I think
it
that
was
was just the opening mechanic to
it
show
was,
there's
and I was
bosses
like,
in the game.
I hope the rest of the bosses ain't gonna be like that, but it was fine.
You fought the beetle, right?
The beetle, the beetle, the beetle, beetle.
Yeah, early on. It's an early on one, but a lot of what
That's
the
pretty much the
beetle and the
first
wolf
boss.
showed us as players were that if you pay attention to the surroundings, to the world, and it's all very subtle. The game actually tells you how to beat each boss very quietly, and you have to be patient. And I think both the wolf and the beetle's purpose were to show the player that if you are patient and if you pay attention to that world, they will teach you how to beat and win against each of your respective enemies. And that was a big lesson for me. Once you take out that beetle early on, that spoke the language of the game to me as far as a combat from a combat perspective.
Yeah, so as of right now, you know, before we get big into the bosses, I do want to go over a couple of the mechanics and the bosses. What's your favorite abilities?
Uh,
I'm sure.
uh, I definitely
Uh,
like the grapple. I think that's cool. The dash. I just like the combination of them all. Like that's just using them all together in combination is just really cool.
I like the
And
spear,
but
man.
I think my favorite thing in general is just the hammer. The using the hammer, and I have it upgraded so it creates a shock wave. So yeah.
So
there
what about you, Lucas?
I tell you, there's an ability you get in late game that I will not share that quickly became my favorite once I got it. But I will speak to that hammer that BG brought up. I loved that hammer because it felt a lot different than the standard melee, and because each of our abilities are upgradable. I hit a glitch early on where I could not upgrade my energy cells. So I actually didn't upgrade some of my abilities that would use more energy for that exact purpose. And so I had a different experience with that hammer than BG did, and yet it still proved to be my favorite, which I thought was really neat.
In terms of bosses, that hammer is definitely the most. Not even bosses, like any bigger ads, that hammer turned out to be really essential because when you hit someone with that hammer, they
Oh yeah.
weren't they were feeling it. Like they were
Hmm.
definitely feeling. I remember there's a combat stone that I did that those big people with the shields, like you need that hammer to do anything to them because if you didn't, they
Hmm.
would hit you one time and pretty much kill you.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I like the fact that the enemies actually react to that. When they get hit by a hammer, they actually react like they've been hit by one. So I really appreciate. I hate that. I hate games where when you do damage, it's kind of like you see the inflicted damage, but you don't see them react to it. Like, okay, they're just taking damage and they'll just die eventually. I hate those games that are like that.
Yeah, and my favorite ability was the spear. I felt like out of all of them, it was one of the most diverse. I early game, I hated the beetles. Do you guys remember those beetles? They annoyed me, the white beetles, because they would just do that swing attack, and I felt like I was always getting hit by that, and I felt like I always dodged it. But when I got that spear, the spear was just so diverse. You could stay away. It took like half an energy bar, so it didn't take a whole lot. And when you hit them with it, it actually did a crazy amount of damage. For instance, when we fought the last boss, I won't go into it too much, but there's a part in there to where the mobility is not that big, and I was using that spear like crazy. I was like, I don't even care because it's either him or me at this point. And I kept throwing that spear. But in terms of bosses, BG, what I would describe the bosses as is like they're not hard. None of the bosses are like extremely difficult, and I'm not saying in terms of difficulty because obviously if you go up to hard, they're going to be harder because they're going to do more damage to you. They're very predictable, is the better
Hmm.
word. There's the toad that that Kofi was talking about. Like when you fight it maybe you get killed maybe 2 or 3 times. You clearly see exactly what he's doing and how he's doing it. And what I really liked what they did that is they still remained about a platform. I think that's what their highlight is. They don't want to be considered a Dark Souls. Like they don't want to
Hmm.
be considered, Ori's a platformer of Dark Souls. They don't want to be considered that. They want to have some aspects that's in Dark Souls in this game to enhance their game, but still remain true to platforming. And I think they did a great job on it. Which BG, if I asked Lucas what his favorite boss was and he just told me the boss, and would that be okay with you?
Yeah, I don't care. It's all
Lucas,
right.
what's your favorite boss?
Favorite boss was easily the spider. That was a really cool fight. It was difficult. One of the basic premises of Will of the Wisps is that there is a corruption that is infesting the land, and some of those bosses are grandiose creatures. Because Ori is so small, a spider can seem rather big, particularly a giant one. And this spider is corrupted, and watching it combat and move you and push you through the level, as many of the bosses do, they tend to operate in stages. That was a super cool aspect of the combat. But the spider level felt special, especially because, at least for me, as I worked to get to that boss, I struggled a lot not having certain abilities and yet still pushing through, not realizing I needed ability at certain
You know,
times. And the spider was dope for that reason.
what was crazy when I was fighting that spider? I realized that the light ability.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that hurts him. Like I didn't realize that until
Mm-hmm.
you do that section of the fight. But when it comes to the graphics of the game, I personally feel like the graphics. I think the special effects of the game come out more, but I don't think it looks drastically better than Blind Forest. Did you guys get that similar opinion, or did you think it looked, like an actual sequel? Because I didn't think it did, but I thought the way, the water glows, the fire comes out, I thought that looked like an actual sequel. But in terms of, where you are, what it looks like compared to, because a lot of people, just so you know, I beat Blind Forest literally back to back with Ori in the Will of the Wisps. I literally played Blind Forest, and 2 days later I played Will of the Wisps. So I literally had both of them fresh in mind. What do you guys think about the difference between graphics compared to the prequel and the sequel?
Uh, I played Blind Forest about 4 years ago, so it's been some good time. And so, without having done a side by side, it did not note as looking that much better to me, which is a total fallacy. Because I played it, the review copy pre day one patch and post day one patch, and it does change the way the game looks remarkably, which surprised me even more. But once you look at side by side, it's noticeably improved. But just gut reaction after not having played it, I thought, oh, this looks, again, to that phrase you talked about, it looks like more Ori, which is to say it looks beautiful and gorgeous and stunning in nearly every way. But side by side wise, thanks to YouTube and whatnot, I'm like, oh, no, they certainly refined the look in a lot of ways, particularly in subtle animations.
And to be honest with you, even if the game looks similar, like drastically similar, I don't think it would have been an issue, to be honest with you. I think Ori looked fine back then. I think the style of Ori makes it passable. Makes it like, like I've always said, games like Wind Waker for the Nintendo platforms, those type of games with that particular art style ages way better than your standard type of game. What did you think, BG?
Yeah, like when I look at Ori, with Little Wisp, it doesn't like scream this looks way better than the original, but it's because the original looks so good, and with its art style, it's kind of hard to really show that well, with this art this like kind of living water painting style. I'm sure if I looked at the comparisons, yeah, I would notice it looks significantly better, but that's just because it looks so good in the first place, so that's really not its fault.
Yeah, and I definitely, my hat's off to them for stuff like that. Now, would you guys, let's say that, Moon Studio decides they want to continue the platforming or they want to do something else. Do you think they should stay similar to this genre or you think they should go on to something else? Because I feel like they might be the best platformers out there right now. I really do. And I think it'd be a shame because I heard some, whispers that they might actually be getting out of the, this genre entirely. They might be going a completely different genre.
I wouldn't be mad at it. I'm sure they want to explore their talents. I feel like whatever the things that they implement in Ori, whatever game they make, um, you would see that in the foundations of the next game. But I don't really, and I never usually say this, because usually I hate when people say, "Oh, the first game was so good, you don't necessarily need another one." I think Ori is okay at 2. I'm not saying you'd never make a 3. I think you should make a 3, but I think you could take a break.
I agree. What do you think, Lucas?
I think there's a lot of benefit for any studio to diversify their goals, whatever it may be. Now, Moon Studios is in a unique situation in that I believe they have 80 plus people there, but a lot of them work remotely. They're not in the same country even. In fact, they only convene once a year or so to meet in person. So a lot of their stuff is done remotely, and that may or may not impact the creative juices that are flowing there. What does concern me,
It's very
if Moon was
interesting.
to, it is totally interesting, and I plan on talking to one of their studio heads for XCP in an upcoming episode. But what I found is that Ori, as incredible as it is, for any of the faults that it has, it took 5 years to produce. That seems to me to be a long turnaround time for a platforming Metroidvania. Now, again, I'm an amateur on that, and the game is incredible. So there's something to that time. But I would like to see Moon branch just a bit, try and spread their wings and try a different genre. I've seen that be done successfully with Insomniac, with several other studios around the industry. Flexing in a different area space might allow you to return to Ori with a fresh perspective later on.
Definitely. And, we're going to be closing this out here soon, but we got to talk about the biggest highlight of this game. And I know BG feels a little certain way about the statement I'm about to say. I don't feel like Ori would be the same without the music soundtrack. I think Ori is just a platformer, a good platformer, but with the music, it became a great platformer. And, especially, the escape sequences. Now, they did bring those back from the first one. And when you do these escape sequences, I feel like the music is enhancing the situation way better than would without it. What did you feel about the music in this game, Lucas?
Um,
Uh,
so you
uh,
go first. Yeah.
Oh, sure. I thought the music and the sound design were near immaculate. And the way they used orchestral music to ramp up and calm down the player's experience to me was extremely impressive. They used silence at the right times that really echoed off Ori's emotions. So I found the entire orchestral soundtrack to be brilliant. So much so that I played it in my classroom in the few days before they shut down school. I played it in my classroom for my students, and they were enjoying it, which surprised me because you don't get middle schoolers to enjoy that kind of music often. I thought it was wonderful. I really thought it was a wonderful soundtrack throughout and well used at the right times.
What do you feel about the soundtrack, BG? Because I know when it comes to soundtrack, you know doesn't necessarily think a soundtrack can make or break a game.
Uh, See, with Ori, I think Ori's music is so good. It does make a difference to me. I think it's important. With most games, do I think that way? No, but like that Ori menu music, even just the menu music hits different. I'm like, this is that music at the beginning is so different, and like the humming, um, just that you know what I'm talking about when you first turn on the game, and I'm like, man, this is really good, and I really like it. I think it makes a difference in this game. I don't think it makes a difference in every game, but this is
So you're
definitely
just
one of the
saying
ones that
like
I really like to listen to.
certain games the soundtrack can bring it up because I do feel like there's certain games throughout history that the soundtrack was just as important as the gameplay, like Final Fantasy. I feel
Mhm.
like the person who makes that, he was what makes Final Fantasy. Some of the soundtracks when you fight like Seymour in Final Fantasy X, when you fight Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII, like that music is just as important as the gameplay fighting that boss.
Right.
But as far as Will of the Wisps and in all the product it's put out, would you consider this if you were to put a number? Let me what because a lot of people are asking. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say it. Do you think this is in terms of platforming these days? Do you think this is evolving platformers, or it's just staying on the standard path that platformers generally follow? Because to me, I feel like this is better than your average platformer because it's got that Metrovania style in it, and the platforming is just something you do between them. If that makes sense to you, like a lot, I feel like a lot of Metrovania games they just want the platforming itself is just to get to point A to point B. But Ori, you can die is just as easily platforming around this map than you can just fighting a boss. Because some of the ways you get to certain areas in the game, I remember a part in one of the pools where you had to go to the very top, throw a fireball, light a lantern, go to the very bottom, and you had to do it with like 4 energy. And I feel like this is one of the most difficult platformers I've ever played.
Yeah, it's just a really good platformer. I think it just takes everything good and right about platforming. Um, because to me, when platforming is very basic, it's not fun. It has to be like an intricate thing where everything in the environment is useful. It's not just there as an aesthetic. I feel like almost everything in Ori contributes to its platforming. And so I wouldn't say it does anything brand new or completely innovative. It just does everything right, in my opinion.
So what you're pretty much saying is, every platformer's done something okay, but Ori isn't really evolving the platform; it's just doing
Mhm.
everything good.
Yeah.
All right, what do you feel like, Lucas?
I think this continues an excellent trend for Moon Studios at bringing their talents to the platforming space. I don't know that it necessarily evolves the genre. I don't know that it needs to evolve the genre. I think sometimes there's an undue pressure from high profile games or really well scored games to evolve a genre. I'm not sure that it needs to do that. Ori does so many things incredibly well that it makes for a wonderful Metroidvania combat platformer. And I really, really thank it for that because it does it so well and it's enjoyable. As far as evolving the genre, I don't think it needs to, and I don't think it necessarily does in many ways. There are other games that are trying to do that. I think Moon has done a good job at focusing on what they wanted to do, and they succeeded in pulling off their objective.
Definitely. So I got one more question for you in this. obviously Microsoft's been buying studios, and a lot of people are looking at Moon Studio because, as far as I can remember, people have been asking, why haven't they bought Moon Studio? Well, sometimes it doesn't matter if you want to buy someone; they have to want to be bought. But if they were to able to, do you think that Moon Studios is someone they should look at, or do you think that there's because they got other teams to make platformers? Let's be real here. They got Rare could make platformers. They used to make platformers. Double Fine makes platformers. Do you think Moon Studios is a good fit for Microsoft, or do you think they got enough in that, the type of games they make that they need to look somewhere else? So what do you think, BG?
I think even though they got Rare, I think, and there's another developer that does some platforming for them. I think Moon Studios is just different. Not every studio is created the same. Not every studio is equal, and I think they'll go on to make something greater than platformers. So I think they would be a good buy, because I'm sure they're not gonna just stay with like games like this. I'm sure they can make something way greater. I think there would be something really cool to have in your portfolio to just make quality games.
Yeah, and I think that this is their stepping stone too. But what do you think, Lucas?
I think it would absolutely be a no-brainer for Microsoft to pick up Moon Studios. They've performed as a second-party studio for the past 2 Ori games. I think it would make perfect sense to bring them into the Xbox Game Studio fold. There's a lot of talent there. Their ability to work remotely could bring a lot of industry-side lessons to other studios around Xbox Game Studios. So absolutely, Microsoft, I'm sure by now they already have, but look to picking them up, adding them to their slate. That'd be a great pickup if it were to come to pass.
Yeah, I personally feel like, just me, and I know a lot of people in the chat probably disagree. I want them, if they did pick up Moon Studios, I think they would make a good Banjo game. Because I think they have a good roots when it comes to platformers. And what I like about them that, even that the old Banjo's game wouldn't do is I feel like they would think outside the box to, really bring that brand out. Because, a lot of people want Banjo-Kazooie. Clearly Rare doesn't seem to be interested in doing it. So I think another studio would have to do it. Do you guys think they could make that, or do you think Banjo's pretty much dead?
I just don't know if I want them to make another Ori. I don't know if another Ori, another Banjo. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something I want personally.
Oh, I want another Banjo, man. I want another Banjo. What do you think, Lucas? You a Banjo-Kazooie guy?
No, not at all.
Oh man, I really messed up with this panel today.
But I tell you this, Addict, Banjo's not dead. They wouldn't have put him in Smash otherwise. Certainly not a dead franchise. There's gonna be a lot of love for that franchise. I don't necessarily know that I want Moon Studios to be the people to make another Banjo game.
I just feel like at the end of the day, there ain't a lot of people that I trust with that, man. Like, maybe Double Fine, but I'm a huge Banjo fan.
I mean, there are plenty of studios that can make a mediocre game. Like
oh my God! Please stop! Please. Oh man! You lucky my stream deck ain't hooked. I'd have muted you for that one. But definitely, I'm very regardless if they make multiplats going on here forward, because I don't know what the relationship with them and Microsoft is. I'm gonna definitely look at their games from here on out, because I actually was one of those people that I haven't really played platformers in the past 5-6 years, so I stayed away from it. But with the hype for Ori and the Will of the Wisps coming out, I was like, you know what? It's on Game Pass, so let's try it. So I tried it, and before I know it, 2 days went by and I beat it. And then I didn't ask for a review code for Will of the Wisps because I didn't think I wanted to play Will of the Wisps. And I was like, man, I'm sitting there like on Twitter, like, how can I get me a review code? Like, the game comes out tomorrow night. But I was able to hook me up with one, and it's definitely the best game I think I've played this year. What do you guys think in terms of? Do you think it's the best game you've played this year? I mean, I know we only in March. We're about to end the show after you guys say this, but I do want to get a kind of idea of where this game lines in terms of the games you've already played.
I think We are in March, and a lot of our AAA games have been pushed back. But right now, to date, if it's not the best, it's certainly up there. It's an incredible game. It is marred by some technical hiccups that I think might hold it back from Game of the Year conversations down the line, outside of its genre, Metroidvania or platformer. But it is certainly an incredible experience. The fact that it's on Game Pass only adds value to it. I think anybody that picks up Ori immediately will see quality oozing from every aspect of it. And if you're daunted by the idea of a difficult platformer or a difficult combat set of scenarios, play it on easy and just enjoy the beautiful animations. This is one of the best games to come out in a long time, and that is to its credit, and not to put down any other game that will be coming out.
Do you accept that statement, BG? Play it on easy.
Oh yeah. I think even with everything that's coming out this year, this is still going to be one of the best games of this year. And it's just going to be a good game, a good year overall. And this is probably going to be, I think, a Game of the Year contender.
I do think it is. The only reason I'm a little iffy if it gets nominated, because I think this is a Game of the Year contender, but this year we have a lot of stat games, so it's hard to tell if it'll actually get nominated. But that's the show, you guys. Now, first off, I want to apologize. I definitely kind of winged this. Normally, I write these shows, but I wasn't in the mood to write anything today and yet last night. So I definitely appreciate people sticking with me. Didn't really get a whole lot of chat because for some reason Kofi decides to go live the exact moment I go live. Go figure there. But I appreciate everyone that showed up. I appreciate BG, and I appreciate Lucas. Lucas, where can people find you? Well, you gotta. You're one of the very few people I know that do a show by themselves that's actually good. And I'm not saying that people that do single shows are bad. I'm saying it's not easy and I can't do it.
Oh, that is you are far too kind, and I appreciate it. I host a solo show on all your podcast services called the Xbox Expansion Pass, and I would love for your audience to go check it out. I try to offer insight on the gamerverse as it pertains to the Xbox ecosystem and what seems to be relevant there. I often host interviews. I've had guests like Steven Spawn from Able Gamers. I've had guests from around the industry, ID at Xbox developers. On the next episode, I'll have Rebecca Valentine coming in to talk about her experience at GameIndustry.biz. And maybe if you like Ori, keep your eyes peeled for something else coming up. Xbox Expansion Pass. I would love for you guys to check it out on your podcast services.
Yeah, definitely go check that out. Now, that's not a live. That's a pre-recorded show, correct? So
correct, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
recorded on Sundays, goes live on Mondays.
Yeah, definitely look out for that. Where did you say where people can find you on Twitter? Because they
of course
they got to know that to be able to follow you and to go to your episodes.
You are correct, and I would love for anybody to follow me on Twitter at InsipidGhost.
InsipidGhost. Okay, BG. I don't think anyone really gotta explain who you are, but for anyone that might come in here that gets in the YouTube search algorithm, who is BG?
Hey, make videos about pretty much anything I want. All gaming, of course, but Weapon Wheel Podcast is what you really need to watch on Sundays. And Ghost, I'm definitely gonna have you to come on one of these Sundays. Sundays at 6:30. So yeah, Weapon Wheel Podcast.
Stu Jersey X asks, is it on YouTube? I don't think it's on YouTube. It's not a live thing. You don't have a YouTube channel, do you?
No, I don't.
It's on the podcasting service.
iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, etc.
Yeah.
Even Pandora.
It's even
Weapon Wheel Podcast is on all of those too, but of course we're on YouTube too.
Yeah, so definitely appreciate everyone coming by. Appreciate the staff. We're gonna go ahead and close this up. What's up? You guys coming in? Kofi went down, didn't he, man? But I appreciate everyone coming out. I'm gonna go ahead and end this. This is the Addict Spotlight on Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and see you guys later.